Hello, welcome to our latest Digital Grotto conversation. Today we welcome Ms. Heather Arnet, the CEO for Women and Girls Foundation in Pittsburgh, PA. And Heather is here today to talk about voice, and along with our speaker series this year, the idea of voice for women and girls, but also the voice of equality. So I'd like to begin today by asking Heather to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her work.
Thank you. Well, I'm really honored to be here on campus. I've spent a good chunk of today with students who are all really impressive, and later on today we're going to be screening a film that I wrote and directed and premiered on WQED PBS a few years ago, and is still, in fact, not just still relevant, I guess it's especially relevant this year. The film is titled Madam Presidenta, Why Not Us? And the us is spelled US. And it really explores the question of how it is that so many other countries have come to elect female presidents before the United States.
I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the Women and Girls Foundation in general.
Sure. So the Women and Girls Foundation is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We work on statewide policy issues. We work to break down barriers so that every girl can rise and every woman can soar. And so that involves fighting for things like equal pay for equal work and women's reproductive health and a range of issues. Right now we're working on paid family leave, and
Yes.
It's really exciting, and we engage women and men and boys and girls. Everyone is engaged in our work for gender equity.
Thank you. So I think one of the reasons I was interested in having you come to the college and speak was the work that you do really does empower, and it really fits well with our theme of voice for this year. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about your idea of what voice means to you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful that you're having a year to explore voice, because when we think about even the term, and especially for, I guess, a political activist like myself, I think about, well, how can we use our voice? And we can use it in so many ways, and it can mean so many different things. So, using your voice can mean going to a protest. Using your voice can mean writing an email to the president of the college, right? Mm-hmm. Using your voice can be writing an email to a teacher, right, around some sort of injustice you see in your school or in your classroom. But it can also mean writing an op-ed, right? It can also mean having a blog. It can also mean using your money as voice, deciding to support companies that promote your values and not supporting companies that don't support your values. So there are all these different ways, and certainly film has become a really wonderful and strong use of voice. Now it is more affordable than ever for social justice activists to use film as a medium to get our voices out there and engage other people. And I think, at the Women and Girls Foundation, what's important to us is just that everybody realize that they do have a voice, and they should use it in whatever way is comfortable for them to bring about change. And almost everyone looks out onto the world and sees something that they'd like to improve, something they think could be better. And at the Women and Girls Foundation, what we try to do is empower everyone, boys, girls, grown-ups, to realize that you do have a voice and you have the right to use it to bring about change. So
Yeah, thank you. And I found the film very powerful, and I'm excited to share it with others. And I think it speaks to the changes that other countries have been dealing with, and the changes that we will be dealing with in the coming years. One of the kind of themes is women in politics. So do you think that the voice of women in politics is changing, and what do you see on the horizon?
So, one of the things, it's interesting thinking about voice and democracies, and one of the things that we found in looking at the film was that so many of actually all of the countries that had elected female presidents, when we say current, it's the year the film was made in 2012, we looked around and we looked at all the countries at that time that had female presidents or prime ministers who had been elected by their people. And what we saw that they all had in common was that they all had new constitutions. Many of these were very new democracies, or their constitutions had been completely rewritten since World War II. And that really got me thinking about, what is your voice in your own democracy? In the film, at one point we explore Dilma Rousseff, who was elected as their first female president, and how she was involved as a revolutionary in the fight to bring about democracy. And then we interviewed some women who were involved in writing the Constitution, Brazil's new Constitution for their new democracy. And this really got me thinking about, as a female child growing up in the United States, what did I learn about our Revolutionary War and the role that women played? Did I think that women were just as active as men in bringing about our democracy? What about their role in writing our laws? Did I, as a girl child, grow up thinking that we were equal partners with men in writing the Constitution, or sort of creating the rules of the game? So one thing is that often I find that when we talk about women in politics, we kind of start at the end of the sentence. We talk about the lack of women in office now, or lack of participation, and we end up just looking at the end of the sentence. So we'll talk about, are women more or less likely to run? You know, are they good candidates? Do they raise enough money? You know, should we have more training programs for women? And I think we need to look back, you know, at the beginning of the sentence, and at least acknowledge, if not start to think about critically, what does it mean that we weren't there at the beginning? Or if we were, we don't talk about it. Right. So if is it possible that if we talk to our children more about the role that women played in the Revolutionary War, the choice to start a democracy, what roles have they played in shaping the laws in the past, that female children might grow up to be more likely to believe that they are part of their democracy as full partners, and that boys and men would look at them that way too. So one of the things that I hope is a takeaway from our film, especially for female viewers, is that we should stop asking or thinking we have to ask for permission to participate in our own democracy. You know, that we should assume and take our full participation at the table. You know, and I think that we still think we're a guest at someone else's table, and that makes the difference.
As you were telling us that story, I was reminded of your TED Talk, and you talked a little bit about some of the things that sparked you as a child, and I noticed your phone case, and I wondered, some students had asked about the role of media, and so maybe you could share that story of what you think of when you think of being a young girl and some of the television programs that you saw, but also how media has really changed, and how using activities like films or other media can help us to make some progress.
Sure, yeah. So for viewers who haven't seen my cell phone case, it's a Wonder Woman figure, and that my son gave me the case for Mother's Day. And you know, some of your viewers might have themselves some sort of collect, you know, once one person knows that you like something, that's it, everybody will, you know, I now have tons of Wonder Woman things, and I think I've only personally bought 2 of the, you know, many things I have, so I'm grateful that people have given me these things through the years. And why that is yeah, I often talk about doing this work, doing this kind of activist work, or even work where you're trying to empower others, and how do we even begin to think about that. And as a young child, I did, you know, read Wonder Woman comic books, and when I was growing up, there was, you know, Wonder Woman television show, and so she was this really great figure in many ways of this sort of powerful woman, you know, in ways that superheroes are powerful, right? But what's also interesting about that character as a superhero is that several things. One is, in the original comic books, a number of the stories are actually about issues we still wrestle with around women's rights and women's issues. So there are episodes where the storylines are on domestic violence victims, and trying to help them get away from their oppressor. Or one of them is around, the villain is a man who basically doesn't want girls to be educated. So one of the things that was so interesting to me, I can look back as an adult now to that child reading those comic books, is that the version of that superhero for me, there's one comic book that ends with the women in that particular story saying to Wonder Woman, like, "Thank you so much for saving us," right? And she says, "I didn't save you, you saved yourselves." And that's a really different message than you usually get at the end of a Superman comic,
Sure.
right? And that's, I think, what philanthropists or those who engage others as activists, that's us on our best day, right? Which is empowering other people to realize that they had the strength all along in themselves to change and improve their situation. But I also think because you mentioned media and the role of media in all of this, here we are talking about this pop culture icon, right? Who was started in the early 40s. And of course, we are now in 2016 anticipating her cinema debut. So when we think about gender equity, it's so, here's this, we can seem silly, here we are talking about Wonder Woman, doesn't seem like a serious topic, and yet we can think about it critically and think, okay, so here's this character who's very popular, and has not gotten her own, film yet. Right. And I remember sitting in the movie theater with my son watching previews, and it was a preview for Ant-Man. And I just turned to my son and I was just like, that is the last straw. Like when Ant-Man gets his own film for Wonder Woman, and our poor fictional characters are struggling with equity issues.
Oh, that's good. One of the things that I think is also interesting is the way that you've used the film to spark the dialogue, and you can't just rent the film from Netflix. So, why do you think it's important that we host screenings and use that context? How do you think that that's going to help the conversation move forward?
And we've really been intentional about having the film, it's available for screenings. We want communities to be showing the film in a public way, to have a talk or Q&A before, after, a panel discussion. The film was specifically made to be 1 hour so that it would fit in a 1 hour television slot on PBS, but also so that we always imagined you could have an event and it could be the film and a conversation afterwards, or a conversation and then the film, and it wouldn't be this sort of exhausting time frame, right? And it's been fantastic to have these. We've had dozens and dozens of screenings on college campuses, and that's been really important, because these issues, if you just watch it on your phone, or iPad, it's just you watching something. And change really starts when we start to talk to one another. And so the conversations that happen before the film, the conversations I hope will happen at the end of the film, viewers who are watching this and who didn't come see the film, maybe you can find another student who did, and just ask them about it, because when we showed an early version of the film to some of the supporters who had supported it, one of the women said, well, I've watched the film and I still don't know that I have the answer. Like why not us? Right. You didn't tell us the answer. And I said, well, right, that's not my job as a filmmaker. I don't think is to give you answers. My job should be to get you asking questions. Right. And so if you leave the movie theater and you start to ask questions you never asked before, then I feel like the film's been successful.
Definitely. I'm sure that there will be questions after. So we are here on a college campus setting, and the last few weeks have been students moving in on campus and getting settled in and perhaps finding their voice. So I wondered, as you think of your own experiences, or you've observed experiences with some of the women in your foundation, how would you advise a college freshman to find their voice, male or female? How do you find your voice?
Such a great question. So as you were asking it, I did sort of go back to thinking about that first week, those first few weeks of college. I'm a first generation kid going away to college, first generation kid going away to college, and so my parents didn't have that experience to share with me. But probably whether you're first generation or not, there's those first few weeks, and two of the things I think that were really important to me that made a big difference in kind of the rest of my life, not just kind of my college experience, was the clubs that I joined. So it's interesting, on the way here we walked through the club fair. Sure. So I ended up first probably just being a writer, but eventually, working my way up and being one of the editors of the college alternative newspaper. So it wasn't the official newspaper, it was the alternative one on campus. And that ended up being such a really important community of thinkers and writers, the getting to know other people and getting to play with my own literary voice, getting to decide I could write about anything, right? We were the alternative paper, nobody was assigning me, go review this theater on this play on campus. We mostly did, kind of opinion pieces or just what we were thinking about that week. That was a really great way to begin to use my voice, but also I joined the women's collective. There was a women's center on campus at that time, and a lot of the things that I ended up sort of thinking about and learning about as an activist, I learned in that environment. When we would bring in speakers, we had lunch today with some students, and I got to have that experience as a student mainly through the Women's Center. And that was a great opportunity to get to go to dinner with an author, go to lunch with a filmmaker, and to start to use your voice not just with other students, but with artists and writers and thinkers at the sort of professional level.
Right.
And then I also just, the other way is thinking about, student government. And I write and, talk a lot about women in government, and I wasn't involved in our student government as an elected position, but I did go to those student government meetings and advocate for things that we needed. At that time, I went to Carnegie Mellon, and I remember we didn't have kind of any. The shuttle vans only ran to a certain time, and so then there really was this issue of walking on campus at night alone, and so several of us brought that issue to the table, and then that way the student government sort of heard it as an issue. So that can be very powerful, and I think sometimes if people think, oh, I don't really like to do those things, I don't want to be in student government, but you don't have to be in it as an elected official to make a difference or to use your voice.
That's good. And I teach an 8 a.m. class, so maybe you can plug going to class now.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Always going to class is a good way to use your voice in the morning.
That's right.
8 a.m. class, that's hard.
It's fun, actually. Yeah. It's good. I think most of them are.
You probably have all the morning people in that class.
That's right. Well, I appreciate you joining us here at Mount Aloysius College. We're so happy to host you, and we're looking forward to the documentary this afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.